Well, good Monday morning. This is Dick Black, Focus on the News. I'm a retired senator and retired colonel. Today we're going to be joined by Suzzane Satterfield, but first I have a couple of things I'd just like to touch on in summary because there's a lot of news taking place. The first thing I just want to briefly touch on this terrible mass killing of 18 people in Maine, many others injured. They were shot by a deranged individual who was subsequently, I believe, killed. Turns out that the authorities had been notified by the National Guard and others in a very credible way that this individual presented an imminent danger, that he was going to carry out a mass shooting, and yet relatively little was done. The sheriff's department went and checked on the place. I think they were worried that the people from the sheriff's department were worried that they might be killed by this guy, so they were rather timid in the way that they approached it, kind of understandable. But listen, there's a lesson to be learned from this. And this is what it is. In 1965, the United States embarked on a national deinstitutionalization program. What that meant is we had all of these mental hospitals that cared for people who were mentally ill, schizophrenics, various types of mental illness. There was this liberal notion that somehow it's so unfair to keep people with mental illness locked up. And so they turned them all out, turned them out onto the streets, and dangerous madmen were unleashed to prey on communities. The crime rate spiked, and it's never really entirely gone down. Today, most of our states allow lunatics to be briefly hospitalized, but only for a few days or a week. When I was in the Virginia Senate, I fought very hard to expand the time of institutionalization. And while I was able to increase it by perhaps 20 or 30%, 30% of nothing is nothing. It's simply not adequate at all. A rational nation would admit the abject failure of this program. We have, when I was growing up, we did not have homeless people. They didn't exist. It's hard to believe, but a great portion of them are the people who were deinstitutionalized. Today we have homeless people dangerously drifting around our streets. Rational nation would recognize that this has been an abject failure and resume caring for mental patients in hospitals and not on the streets. So that is the lesson learned. Second topic I want to touch on before we get into our main program. I'd just like to update people on Israel and the Gaza Strip. In Israel, the air attacks continue, and there is a significant but still limited ground attack that has been launched, and it's underway right now. The attack on the highly compressed Palestinian population of Gaza has killed over 7,000 people, most of them civilians. Gaza Strip is a relatively small portion of land, heavily urbanized with kind of skyscrapers. There's very little land of any sort. It's just all streets, roads, and people crammed in, back to back in there. So when places are bombed, civilians are killed. That's just the nature of the combat. Now, at this point, the world's Islamic nations, which include a huge array, Indonesia, for example, is heavily Islamic, all of the Middle East and many other places, all of the Islamic nations are incensed and they're united against Israel. This has been a tremendous blow to Israeli respect. And all of this began with an attack by Hamas on the Israeli border, killing 1,400 of the settlers and capturing 230 others. Now, those 1,400, I would say about a third of those were soldiers and police officers. Now, what happened is that when Hamas attacked across the border, they were stunned to discover that the border was essentially undefended. They attacked against no resistance whatsoever. The lesson learned here is that Benjamin Netanyahu pulled 2/3 of all of the Israeli soldiers off the Gaza border to help his allies, the settlers on the West Bank. The West Bank is sort of on the opposite side and end of Israel. And the settlers were about to have a very provocative celebration that they were conducting adjacent to the lands that they were taking over from the Palestinians there. Netanyahu knew there would be problems. He knew there would be backlash from the Palestinians. And so he pulled 2/3 of the entire army off the southern border, essentially left the border undefended. At a minimum, Netanyahu should be removed from office. He's been under criminal indictment for years, and so at a minimum, he should be removed and perhaps tried for a criminal dereliction of duty. Now, the other lesson I would mention is that Americans should be reminded of the very obvious dangers of our own open borders, which have permitted a foreign invasion of historic proportions to occur, and it is occurring as we speak now. And America's border is being breached by people, many of them intensely hostile to the American people. They hate us. They hate who we are. They're envious of us, and they want to take those things that we have and make them their own. I'm sure there are some good people coming across, but there are very few electrical engineers and nuclear physicists. We have an enormous army of basic laborers who will come across. A great portion of them will go immediately on welfare and never come off, and they'll be supported by the other Americans who are working. This will undermine America forever, and as near as I can tell, that is the purpose of the Biden administration, ushering them in, coordinating this whole program to have these foreigners enter the country. Okay, with that, I want to get into our principal topic, which it would be comical if it were not so tragic. But in any event, we're joined today by our guest, Suzzane Satterfield, who is one of the most heroic people I know in terms of trying to push back on the erosion of public education, the moral and academic collapse that's occurring in Virginia's schools and schools all around the country. So, Suzzane, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, and I apologize in advance for the smoke alarm that's going off in the background. I got it knocked off for a little bit, and I ran away during your intro because it went off again, and it's just wonderful that things don't last like they used to. So,
well, we're glad to have you. I didn't hear the alarm going off, so I think you're fine. What we're going to be talking about today is that we have statewide elections taking place in Virginia. The election day is November the 7th, but there are early voting is taking place all across the state. And what's interesting and what we're going to talk about today is the character of the candidates who have been put forward by the state Democratic Party in Virginia. And we have an avowed Satanist, and we also have Danica Rhoem, who is campaigning to become the first transgender senator in Virginia history. Hurrah! What do you think of that, Suzzane?
Well, unfortunately, as you know, he's already been reelected as a House delegate, and we know the damage that he's caused because of that. He's rallied troops against what are important bills like Sage's Law, who was sex trafficked, and it was hidden from her parents that she wanted to be a boy at school, and she had run away and was sex trafficked. And Sage's Law was merely to not keep secrets from parents. And Danica Rhoem helped rally the troops in the Democratic Party to say that parents want to harm their children that have gender dysphoria. And so therefore we don't have Sage's Law. So God only knows what more damage he could cause as he, would have an opportunity as senator. We know that he is arm in arm with Scott Wiener in San Francisco, the senator who is one of the most perverted people in the United States, who has had created and supported the most damaging bills to date to children and families in California.
Well, it's quite a network. I don't know how many Americans are aware of the depths of sexual perversion. This whole LGBT, pedophilia, child grooming, transgender movement it's really undermining America in many ways. The same people who are behind this are behind the movement to defund the police, to facilitate smash and grab robberies. Danica Rhoem has voted for every radicalization of Virginia law that has taken place in the short years since I left the Senate. I was just stunned by the collapse. Even, I had many friends on the Democratic side of the aisle, and during the primaries, I was amazed. These were liberal people. They and I never voted alike, but they were primaried and they were removed. That we had, I don't know what, we had 4, 6 somewhat moderate Democrats who were all eliminated and replaced by candidates who were truly extreme, almost anarchistic rebels against civilization. And that's kind of become the nature of the Democratic Party. So they can criticize Republicans for all sorts of things, and certainly the Republicans are anything but perfect. But when you compare the two parties today, the Democratic Party it's like a cancer. It's nothing like when I was first elected 20 years ago. So it's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about Danica Rhoem, who's running for Senate in Northern Virginia?
Mm-hmm. Well, so again, Danica, he has his name is birth name is Daniel Anthony Rhoem. He had changed his birth certificate in Virginia to say female, and it's now Danica Anthony Rhoem, which is interesting. He still chooses to keep a male identity in his name, but he is a male. He's had female hormones. We call them wrong sex hormones. And I believe maybe some chest modification. And he lives as a full male on the second half of his body. He goes into women's restrooms and locker rooms and wants to be referred to as a she. I think there's a lot of people in his district that are unaware that he is a man. And I think he's the most dangerous candidate that we have in Virginia right now.
Yes, he is an incredible disgrace to the state of Virginia. He was one of the delegates who served in my Senate district. So we often went to public events where, Republicans and Democrats were invited if they were representing that area. And he was always very leery of me because I don't pull any punches with people. I'm always very courteous, but I don't play games. I don't pretend that a man is a woman is a man. And but I know from many of my friends in the House of Delegates that he would go to the women's bathroom and he would urinate while standing. He would be at the mirror, primping himself up with all sorts of stuff on his face to pretend he was a woman, and quite obviously not a woman. And the women who were there in the ladies' room were just creeped out by this freak. I mean, they're required to, they have to use the restroom because during the breaks you've got short breaks and you got to run down there, get in, get out. So they don't have any choice. They can't go anywhere but the particular restroom where Danica Rhoem hangs out. But I know that, I don't think there was any woman in many female members of the House of Delegates who was not really creeped out by this freak show who comes in and just because he calls himself a woman and wears a dress, he's able to go in the ladies' room whenever he wants.
And think about it, he's almost 6 feet tall, So, I mean, any man you should be alarmed by instinctively, but he's a tall man, he's not a frail man. So the sight of that even more so, it adds the shock. And he knows what he's doing. He knows that he's taking up their space. He wants you to be uncomfortable. That's what people in his sick-minded way want. That's why they're doing what they're doing. And we have a problem here in our schools here in Loudoun County with, girls being uncomfortable with boys going into their bathrooms. And there's girls that are staying home from school during their cycles or calling home sick because they're afraid to be in there. And we have a school board member who's voted for this, who is running for re-election. And when I've mentioned these things to him, he calls that rhetoric.
Yeah, we've, the public schools, their focus on education has seemingly evaporated, and their focus on pronouns, many thanks to Danica Rhoem and the Democratic Party, who pushed through this policy that requires teachers to stand up and publicly lie in front of their students and to call boys girls and girls boys as long as the student demands it. So it puts the student in charge. It makes the teacher subordinate, which causes, of course, a total breakdown of law and order within the classroom. And it forces the teacher to acknowledge and sort of to kneel down to this perverse notion that somebody can change their sex by simply putting on a dress or putting on a man's suit. So it's people like Danica Rhoem that are up for election, and the other fellow we'll get to in a minute, the Satanist. These people, they despise morality. They despise Christianity. They sort of worship evil itself, and it's driven by a hatred of their fellow people. I've never used a foul word towards anybody while I was in the Senate, but people knew exactly where I stood at all times. But I'm not sure if America cannot overcome people of that sort. I think our future is dim indeed. Well, let's see. Let's talk just a little bit about the fellow who's reported in the dailywire.com. And the Daily Wire headline reads, Virginia Democrat pushed after school Satan club and has a fixation on the demonic. It goes on, the byline says, party backed Jeremy Rhoem backed the club even after a Satanist went on a murderous rampage just 5 minutes from the school. And so what do you think of having a Satanist as the candidate for the House of Delegates in the 90th House District near Chesapeake?
Well, in the article, it says right in there that the Satanic Temple calls itself the leading beacon of light in the battle for abortion access. So that just tells you right there where their mind is, what their goals are. And so it's fitting for the Democrat Party, obviously, because that's all that they're about in this election in Virginia is abortion. And abortion lies. They have nothing else in their platform this year except to make lies about women's reproductive rights being taken away. And the fact that he's brought this all the way down into the elementary school level is it's alarming. It's alarming. In the article, they talk about against Christianity. So there's nothing. When there was another article I read where they tried to say that this is a group for critical thinkers and all this, word salad of individual thought. No, it's a hate group at the end of the day. And it's alarming. And you have a Louise Lucas, who is the Virginia Senate leader, who backs him. She backs Danica Rhoem, and she also backs another senator, controversial candidate, Susanna Gibson, who was found online making sex tapes with her husband for tips. And so think about that. As the party as a whole, they're soulless.
Yes, I know Senator Lucas very well. Her principal goal in my time in the Senate was to introduce gambling in the state of Virginia, casino gambling. She used to put forward a big push for it every single year, and she opposed every moral virtue consistently. And during the big BLM riot, she was one of the big instigators of the BLM revolution that took place. And in fact, she was involved in one of these riots where they pulled down statues, and one of her cohorts pulled down the statue and almost killed himself when the statue fell on him. So she's just a sad example of what the Democrats have come to. Here's a posting. This is Jeremy Rhoem, the Democrat candidate for House of Delegates in the 90th district near Chesapeake. In November 2022, he posted a flyer to his Facebook page that said, "Hey kids, let's have some fun at After School Satan Club." Where was it? It was at the B.M. Williams Primary School in Chesapeake. In other words, these are little children starting at 6 years old, I suppose. And then he writes, "I can't wait to sign up my second grader for this after school club." Well, imagine a parent signing their child up to a Satan club, and then there's a note on this flyer that he posts, and he said, and the note says, "Note for those who don't know this. This club does not practice any religious indoctrination whatsoever." In other words, don't worry about any of this Christianity or anything like that. We are here just to indoctrinate your kids to accept evil, the occult, Satanism, and of course, along with that goes abortion, goes sodomy, goes transgenderism, all of the perverse elements that we see today. What do you think? What do you think people are going to do at the elections this November the 7th?
Well, I like to think we're getting more people out this year because of what's going on in our local school boards and our state. I do know we are getting some people moving over. I've gone to early election where people have said, "Oh, it's the first time that I am crossing party line. I am done with the Democratic Party right now. I've seen the perverse that's happening in our schools and the failures. And so I can't do it anymore." So my hope is that there are more and more people, but then there's some diehards still of people that want to deny what's actually happening, who read in the local paper about book banning. I had a lady when I was door knocking this weekend that said, "Oh, she's going to vote for the incumbent because of book banning." And I tried to explain to her that it's not banning, and that books, they're not textbooks, they're library books that show pornographic images that no child should have access to without their parents' knowledge, without their parents' guidance. And some of these people, they're doubling down on it, and it's horrible. Why is that such an important topic to some of these people instead of learning loss? Kids can't read, kids can't do math, kids' mental health is all over the place because of bringing this type of stuff into schools. They are putting the weight on children of adult topics that they're not capable to even wrap their head around, more or less handle in a mature way. And sometimes dangerously, by giving them misinformation so soon, children do become promiscuous or sexually or with drugs, because they're like, oh, well, I learned this at school. I know what to do. So I hate to get, honestly, with any election, too optimistic, but all I can do is keep my fingers crossed. We're working hard to get the message out. I was at one of the elementary schools handing out the back to school calendars. It was a school that had a big diversity of parents. And I started to just say to them, if you want to get schools back to when we were kids and children weren't left to be dealing with adult topics, then please vote for, the candidate that will get this incumbent off. And these parents, they looked at me and they shook their head and they said, yes, yes, yes. So I am hoping that more people are doing that and resonating and sharing that with their neighbors and family.
Well, excuse me, I certainly hope that you're correct. I have been concerned that the powers that be in Richmond have been a little bit too delicate with what they're talking about. The thing about a campaign is that it really is the job of each candidate from the Democrat and Republican Party to point out the flaws in the other side. And if they don't do it, the public never even learns about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I am worried about the delicacy with the party has been approaching issues like having a transgender person running for Senate, having a Satanist running for House, having this woman, I think she's also running for House, the one who turns sex tricks.
She's running for Senate.
Oh, she's running for Senate. Okay, well, so we'll have a public prostitute potentially in the Senate, together with a transgender person, and they'll make a lively couple if they're elected.
Well, and think about, excuse me, she's a nurse practitioner too. Think about that.
What district is she in?
I forget exactly. It's somewhere in Southern Virginia. But when this came out and got exposed, Louise Lucas jumped all over it and supporting her, supporting Susanna Gibson. And so she slapped right on her, social media. I'm going to raise money for Susanna Gibson, to stay in this race. And, those that can quickly do work realize that all it was a grift for Lucas, because she gets 50% of the proceeds. The money that's collected. And
Louise Lucas, her money lots of it will come from the casinos, from the gambling casinos, because that's what she promotes, and all the casinos they have no interest in morality. Their concern is money, and if they can get more people gambling and taking money out of household budgets and putting it into the slot machines and the on the craps tables, then that's what they'll do. So anyway, it's going to be interesting. Certainly, we'll be working and praying that we can pull off some victories and start to turn this state around. We badly need it. Well, listen, that's going to wrap it up for today. Suzzane Satterfield, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. For those who would like to share what we're doing, you can reach us on Twitter. The address is @SEN Richard Black, @SEN Richard Black. Okay, well, thank you for being with us, and we will see you next Monday.
Thank you.